Hello, everybody, and welcome to Boss Talks. I'm your host, Evan Happel. We have a great guest for episode 102, Bobbi Steward with Revyse. She is the CEO of the company. It's a startup still, but they are doing some great things, really bringing awareness to the Proptech space when it comes to all the different companies that we have out there, especially since the pandemic. I think just keeps growing and growing, yet we don't necessarily know who and what everything does. So, and how effective they are. So, they're definitely trying to bring clarity to the space and help you, the buyer in multifamily, know what you should be buying, what you should know about all the different tech stacks out there and how well do they work together. So, we're going to get into all things prop tech, but also just what's it like to have a startup. What's that life? She definitely was like very interested in talking about that because it is something that not everybody has the experience of. It is also not for the faint of heart because it is a lot of work and it takes a lot of your own blood, sweat, and tears and money and everything else. So we'll get into that. So super excited to have Bobbi on the show today. I am, again, your host, Evan Happel. I'm with Community Boss, and we have a great Proptech solution of our own when it comes to navigating all things physical space, whether that's your parking, your amenities, or mapping. We can generate revenue, just make it a better experience for your residents when it comes to using that space they live in. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. But today it's about Bobbi. So let's bring her to the show. Bobbi.
Hi, Evan.
So great
Thanks
to
so
have
much
you.
for having me. I'm super
Absolutely.
excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you. Like I said, I'm just coming off of a vacation down to not your neck of the woods per se, but Oregon, where you're located, because you're in Bend. But I did go down to Tillamook and Seaside here the last week, and then up to Long Beach, Washington. So had a lot of fun with my family down there, and little break from work. And
Yes,
I know that you said it feels like summer has been a whirlwind, and as kids are going back to school and everything.
it does. Absolutely. I have no idea where it went. It feels like just yesterday I woke up and it was May. And now I'm making sure I've got back to school clothes and backpacks and things, getting ready for the kids' lunches. Um, and there's a part of me that's pretty sad that summer has
Yeah.
gone by. But we've had such a busy season, especially in the multifamily industry, especially being a startup. There is a lot going on right now. So it's been a busy one.
Yeah. Did you have the opportunity to have a little fun too in the midst of startup land with
I
your
had
family, or was
a
it a pretty
tiny bit of fun. I had a
yeah.
tiny bit of fun. We just on a whim decided to fly down to California for 3 days, and we took the kids to Disneyland,
Oh,
which was
nice.
awesome. It was amazing. But it was about 100 degrees and it
Oh,
was so busy. We waited in line for hours and hours and hours, but we got to eat all the fun things and the kids got to go on rides. And so we felt like we had a little moment, a long weekend to take advantage of it.
okay. Well, that's nice. You at least
Yeah.
had a opportunity to get away from it. Although I think it really takes what, a week to, maybe not quite a week, but part of a week to like divest yourself from work to
Yep.
then enjoy.
Yep. I've heard something that it's like the first 3 days, it takes your brain 3 days to get rid of work, and then the final 3 days of the trip, you start ramping back up again. So if
Uh-huh.
your trip isn't longer than 6 days, then you're not actually giving yourself a chance to refresh.
Yeah.
Um, but taking more than 6 days off right now feels like something that's not in the cards. We've got too much going on.
I think when you're doing your own thing too, it's kind of hard. I mean, until you get to a point of a more established and more of a, I guess, group of people working with you and for you, like
Yeah.
it's all on you. Like,
Yep. Totally. There's something nice about getting to the company size where the company is an organism all on its own, right?
yeah.
The company will just continue moving forward as people shift in and out and jobs change and the market changes. But when you're a startup and you are the company, it's everything is a roller coaster.
Yeah.
One minute you are on the highest high, and then you get a single email, and the next minute it's the lowest low. Like it is a roller coaster, but it's
Yes.
fun. But not everybody loves roller coasters.
No, that's true. I do enjoy a roller coaster. And I think maybe someday in some capacity, I don't know if in prop tech or what, but I don't know. I think I could roll with a business of my own. We'll see.
Yeah.
Probably not anytime soon with the kids at the stages they are and stuff, but that's that's a whole nother thing.
It is really fun to see an idea come to life, but there is so much ancillary work that comes along with it. It's a lot. It's a lot to tackle. And it's interesting too because we actually launched Revyse when my daughter was 2 weeks old.
Oh wow.
And it the decision at the time was our lives are such chaos right now having a newborn that we may as well just go head first and just tackle it all at the same time. Like we're not sleeping great anyway.
Yeah.
We might as well start pursuing this and see if we can turn it into something. And so we bit off a lot that year, last year, 2023. But now to see where we've come has been pretty cool, and I'm proud of the team and what we've done. But it was a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. I can imagine. Especially having young children. Yeah, what are the ages of your kids?
My oldest turns 6 tomorrow, and my
Okay.
daughter is 18 months old now.
Okay. Well, happy birthday to your
Yes.
oldest. Yes, that's awesome. That's
Yep.
great. Well, fun. All right. Well, there's a few questions I want to ask before we dive into it anymore. But by and large, this is going to be all about those things that you're passionate about. So when it comes to, I'm sure you haven't seen the different questions I've asked, but I'm mixing it up. I hit 100. I figured I need to refresh. I need some new content when it comes to what I ask in the beginning. So the first question I'm going to ask is related somewhat to our product. And you worked in multifamily a little bit, so you probably got some exposure, especially with the marketing side of things. When it comes to parking, and it maybe isn't related to your work in multifamily, it could be something else too, just personal. Any stories you personally have when it relates to parking, whether it's in multifamily or just in and around your personal life? That could be funny. What you
Oh my
heard on site
gosh.
at a community.
Stories related to parking. I It's an interesting one. Nothing super specific to
Sure.
parking, but I think going from and you touched on it. So I always say that I've worked in the trifecta of multifamily because I started out on the vendor side working at a company called G5, which is now a
Hmm.
RealPage company. And then I went to the ILS world and I worked at realtor.com. And from there, I went to the operator side and I joined BH Management as a senior leader and head of marketing and customer experience. And so I circled the entire industry and saw it from every angle. And going to BH was so eye-opening
Mm,
because I think it's one thing to understand the industry from the vendor perspective and to be able to um, put together the resident life cycle and comprehend all of all the work that goes into managing a property. But
yeah.
until you are actually on that side and you are living it day to day, I don't think that you really understand what it's like to manage people's homes and how beautiful and messy life can get. And you are in the thick of it every single day. You're not just arm's length running these business processes. You are actually sometimes physically present in people's homes, and that gets wild.
Yeah.
So there are so many stories of just the wildest things that happen on site all the time. And my incredible coworkers would tell me, like, we would get to chatting at night, and a story would come up that would remind them of this wild experience that they had one time on site. Sometimes it was about parking, sometimes it was about touring apartments. There was one time there was a story about a golf cart, an apartment tour, and a prosthetic eye, and
Okay.
it got so wild. It actually happened in a parking lot,
Yes.
funny enough. But it's just when you start to think about the day-to-day lives of the people in our residents who we take care of, there's so many unknowns and so many things that can just swoop in and completely upend your day, whether it's parking or leasing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, parking, it ends up being one of those elements that shows up a lot on your reviews, or um, is a thing you're dealing with from a marketing standpoint from that end, and a lot of times forgotten about in that respect. But it's like, if you actually take a time and go and look at your reviews,
Yeah.
it could be 10 to 30% of your reviews are people griping about your parking lot.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's like every business. It's if you're not easy to do business with, if it's not seamless for me to arrive and depart, then you're introducing additional friction, which causes people to rethink how they perceive you as a business.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so next question: being in the prop tech space, being a startup, what is your go-to playlist or just maybe song that you put on to get you motivated, get you going?
Okay. It's interesting that you would ask because at the office, I am the resident DJ. And so
Okay, nice.
every day when we arrive at the office, I'll poll the room and say, hey, what do we feel like listening to today? And today, because it is the interim week before school starts and teachers are in service, one of our team members brought his daughter to work today and she requested Taylor Swift. So today at the Revyse office, it is Taylor Swift Day. So we started
Okay,
with the 1989 album and
okay.
now we've moved to Red. So we're going to circle her whole anthology and visit every era before the end of the day today.
Nice. Do you have the whole concert playing in the background on screen too, or no?
No, but we should. We definitely should. There may be gifts in Slack that accompany each of the songs that play.
Nice. Are you yourself somewhat of a Swiftie? Do you have a little bit of Swiftie in you?
You know what? I am gonna claim it. I'm gonna claim it. I was introduced to Taylor Swift 6 years ago by my son when he was born. He when he was tiny, tiny, and he would hear Taylor Swift song, he would just start jamming. And we used to laugh all the time that like, how did we birthed a Swiftie? And none of us had ever had ever experienced the magic that is Taylor Swift. And as he grew up and we got more familiar with her songs, I ended up becoming a Swiftie. And it really wasn't until last year that I went to the theater to watch the Eras Tour movie. And I was so impressed with like just the concept of a single human being standing alone in the middle of a stage in front of 100,000 people and being vulnerable enough to pick up a microphone and sing songs that you wrote. Like the moment itself is just, it's really inspiring. And it's funny enough, a couple of speaking engagements I've had recently, I actually, before going on stage, have recalled that moment. And I'm like, if Taylor Swift can do it, I can do it. And I like amp myself up thinking about just just how she's embraced vulnerability and sharing who she is with the world. And I think that it's an incredible approach.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, she does make a connection to her fan base, obviously. There's definitely lots of
Yep.
Swifties, and they are
Yep.
paying out the nose for the tickets. So
And she's
they
also a brilliant marketer. And
yeah,
so me having spent some time masquerading as a marketer, I am incredibly impressed with what her team does and how they approach um, building a story and building a community around what's happening. And I think that there's some of that that's so applicable. And I actually can't take credit for it because there are plenty of multifamily folks who have talked about the marketing mastermind behind Taylor Swift and how it can apply to multifamily, which I think is really brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely takeaways. We can definitely learn a lot from things outside of our bubble of multifamily.
For sure.
All right, and then finally, besides the anthem that you're currently listening to get you pumped up, what is your go-to coffee beverage?
Oh, my go-to is an Americano. I'm
Okay.
like as basic and straight up and as fast as I can ingest coffee in the morning.
No, I'm down.
It's like,
That's what I had yesterday at the beach is an Americano, so I'm good.
yep, yep.
Do you add anything to it? Just straight up.
So sometimes a little bit of milk, but mostly just straight up. So, and it's funny because even my 18-month-old, like one of her very first words was coffee because it's mommy's coffee because mommy always has coffee.
Nice. That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you for answering the questions. Now we're going to get right back into it. We touched on it a little bit out the gate when it comes to startup life. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that world of in which you're living and
Yeah.
breathing when it comes to startup? What is it like to, well, first of all, what compelled you to even to jump in? I mean, I know you saw an opportunity, but like frankly, there's been people that have tried something similar to what you guys are doing at Revyse. I don't know how exactly the same it is, but in the past, and they may have been
Yeah.
ahead of their time before there was enough to really dive in. But you're at a point when you jumped in, we really got to a point in Proptech where there was just so much.
Yep.
And it's like, how do we make decisions?
Yeah. It's so true. There was a huge boom. And I know Rural Foundations refers to it as the great app explosion, which I think is so correct. It's the shift that happened during COVID when all of a sudden the business that had been traditionally in person
Mm-hmm.
needed to go contactless and virtual. And
Yep.
so, as operators, we had a lot of really big decisions to make very quickly about how we were going to adapt and evolve during COVID. And a lot of that resulted in adopting new technology, whether it was self guided touring or access control or leasing AI, just being able to make those huge monumental shifts in the way that we connect with our residents really quickly.
Yeah.
So I know my team, we adopted 12 different technologies the first year that I was at the company, which was so much. Just the process of vetting and doing due diligence and buying those technologies, in addition to then managing those vendors after they were a part of our ecosystem, was so incredibly overwhelming. And so it was through that experience that my eyes were really open to, wow, there are hundreds of vendors, not even including our on-site vendors, that each operator is managing. The latest data shows that small to mid-size operators manage about 100 different software systems and apps, and larger operators have upwards of 200, some even close to 300 different software systems that they're using to manage their portfolios. And so the ecosystem is just so big now. And not to
Yeah.
mention the risk and compliance component where there's a lot of opportunity to lose control over what it is that you're doing and to understand how the tools and the partners that you're working with really impact your resident journey. So it was through that experience that I was the catalyst for starting Revyse. And Evan, you had mentioned, there's a couple of people who have tried doing something similar and creating directories in the past, right?
Yeah.
I think the difference with Revyse is that twofold. One is that what we've built is vendor lifecycle management. So we have the marketplace, which is the free customer-facing front door. So operators can go to revyse.com and they can shop for Proptech services, suppliers, by category, by vendor, and see what's out there. But underpinning it all, we actually have a software platform for operators where they can map and manage their vendors, store all of their contracts, store all of their risk and compliance information for those vendors as well. And we're leveraging AI to extract all of the data out of their contract terms to give them incredibly powerful reports and analytics on their ecosystem. So they can see across categories or regions, what am I using? How is that impacting my business? What's my spend on that category? To really empower them to make better buying decisions, to consolidate and cut costs, and also to build a vendor ecosystem that actually becomes their secret sauce.
Yeah. It's good for them to know to what extent the software that they're currently using is getting used and how effectively, because there's a lot of times where even like somebody that's using our platform, for instance, they are making budget decisions, right? And they're just kind of like looking at what's the value in their mind, right? Like whatever they think like it's bringing. And they might cut things that are actually impacting their communities in a positive way, thinking, oh, it just costs a lot. But it's like, but it's doing a lot. Like, what are you doing by cutting this? You're actually hurting yourself. So we find that it's interesting when they make those decisions because they don't have necessarily information unless we really like do a good job of saying, hey, this is all the ways you used us and this, that, and the other. But yeah.
It's interesting too, as an operator, it is a hard job. It is an incredibly hard job. And if you think about the fact that your point of contact might have 80 different vendors, 80 different technologies or suppliers that they're working with just at corporate to be able to manage their portfolio, then you start to understand why they may, like as an operator, I might not have a deep understanding about why this specific tool or this specific vendor is critical, or what the ROI on that is, or what it's doing for me. Especially if I have to dig really deep to understand that. And if it's not made easy for me, because I've got these other 5,000 pressing things that may actually have like flood, blood, or fire, like really, really critical things that I need to take care of. And so if I have to go digging or searching for justification, I might not have time to do it. So it's interesting. I don't think I really understood that when I was on the vendor side. And then when I became the person buying software instead of the person building software, I was like, why don't my vendors make it easy for me to understand how they're benefiting me? I got mad at myself very quickly.
So you got thrown right. I guess you chose to throw yourself into it in the midst of COVID. I mean, you started 2020, was it late 2020, with BH? And previously on the supplier side. What made you make the decision in the midst of all that was going on to jump into it on that side of the business?
A couple of things. Number one is BH has the absolute most incredible people on its team. So Joanna Zabriskie, the CEO, my favorite CEO I have ever worked with. She is incredible. She is a powerhouse. She is smart. She is so good at bringing people along and giving her team space to make good decisions. And she holds fast to what she believes is the right way to do business. And so having the opportunity to work with her and work with the executive team at BH was something that I just couldn't pass up. And in addition, I was really curious, understanding that side of the industry. I wanted to dive in and really experience what it was to operate communities. And it was something that I just wouldn't have been able to replicate had I stayed on the vendor side.
Yeah. And I guess that onslaught of needing to vet different pieces of software in that experience, is that what, I mean, ultimately drove you to what you're doing now?
Yes, it was interesting. And there's one moment that really, I think, was the turning point for me. We were shopping for a really critical piece of infrastructure in our marketing program. I would say it was the linchpin of everything that we were doing. And I had a team that we were working together to tackle this. We got on a call and we said, okay, we're going to make the hard decision to go out for RFP. And I know nobody loves RFPs, right? They're lengthy. They are ceremonious. There's so much writing words in a document that happens during an RFP, right? They're draining for both sides. But we decided that this was such a critical decision. We needed to go out for RFP and we needed to really document our process and understand what we were doing. And so we got in a room and we said, okay, who do we want to invite to join the RFP? And everyone looked at each other and we're like, we don't even know what our options are. We don't even know who we could invite to this RFP. So we all got our laptops out and we started Googling. And we were like, multifamily providers for X, Y, and Z software. And nothing came up. Like, we were having such a hard time even understanding where to start. The sites that did pop up on the search, we submitted contact forms. And not kidding you, not a single one of those vendors responded to the contact form that we submitted on the website. And so experiencing this firsthand, it was so incredibly arduous just to try to open up conversation with vendors in a specific category. I kept thinking, and I would say it all the time, I'm like, somebody's got to build something to solve for this. Like, somebody needs to fix this. And then a couple of years later, that somebody just so happened, crazy enough, to be me.
Yeah. I mean, did you guys, I guess what was the breaking point or the turning point where you finally pulled that trigger?
Yeah. It was the perfect timing. I had been with the company for a couple of years. We had accomplished some really incredible things, some huge initiatives. And I had the most brilliant person on my team who was what anyone could have hoped and asked for, a perfect successor. And I just kept thinking, like, wow, this is an incredible moment. Like, if I stepped away and she stepped into my role, the company would be in such a good spot. And so it was the perfect timing of all of that coming together that I was like, okay, there's something I want to do. And I've got someone who could jump into my role and be absolutely brilliant at it. Maybe this is one of those meant to be moments.
Nice. And I mean, just like you said, when you were in the midst of trying to pick the different softwares and things like that, it was very difficult as to why starting Revyse. What have you learned since starting about the process and trying to build the thing that people go to? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things, because one of the things that I think about a lot of things is there's an aspect of learning people or learning people, teaching people to have new behaviors,
Mhm.
which is a big thing.
Yes. Yeah.
But what have you learned? I mean, maybe in that vein.
Yeah. So much, so much. It's really, I think one of my biggest takeaways is that it really does take a village. And so you could have the best idea, you could have the greatest solution, perfect product market fit. But going from 0 to 1 requires something a little bit different.
Yeah.
It it requires it requires the people around you to be willing to support you and to buy into your vision before you've actually launched. Like, we had so many early supporters of Revyse, relationships that we had built over 10 years in the industry, people who were willing to take a chance on us. Suppliers and vendors who were willing to be one of the first to sign up and support us, knowing that it was going to take us a minute to build our audience. And so, without those people, without that group of supporters who stood behind us and said, yes, we believe in what you're doing and we're going to support you from day one, we wouldn't be where we are now, both on the vendor side and the operator side. The community that has been supporting Revyse has been incredible. And we wouldn't be here without them. And so, going from the very first day that we launched, when we had 0 page views, to now having, you think we're at like 750,000, 800,000, like regularly over 60,000 page views every month. And so now it's like, now we're cranking. Now the industry is building the muscle of understanding that the resource is there. But on day one, when we had 0, we still had people that were willing to support the vision and to sign up and say, yeah, I want to be a part of something that's going to change the game, was really, really impactful. And I think that plays out for founders, no matter what it is you're building. Like, you can't go it alone. Together, what is it? We go alone, we go fast, but together we go far. And I think that really holds true to startup life. When you're going 0 to 1, you need people who believe in you.
Yeah, for sure. What are the you started with a certain goal and vision. What is the biggest thing that you've pivoted on potentially? Um, that's kind of not maybe changed the company, but like changed your direction slightly, or what are those things that you've made adjustments on?
One of the biggest ones is that we didn't fully grasp how big the opportunity was.
Hmm.
And I think some of that was when we started, we were really, maybe had accidentally used the phrase lifestyle business when
Okay.
we very first started Revyse. We were just like, no, we're going to build something that's going to be sustainable. We'll have, maybe a team of like 3 or 4. It'll be small. It'll be like, we'll focus on just being really good at what we're doing. And as our customer base grew and our users kept asking us for more and saying, oh, can you fix this? Can you do that? Can we do this? Will you build this? We didn't realize how big the opportunity was. And so we grew a lot faster than we had actually planned. And we announced in May of this year that we raised our seed round of funding. And when we had first set out, that wasn't something that we had planned on doing in the first year at all. And to have done that 9 months in, I think was a testament to how fast it accelerated.
Nice. So the operator side of things, obviously they're going to drive like what you're doing, because if they don't see the value and they're not using it, then there is nothing. Like,
Yep.
So it's interesting, the parts that you brought up when it comes to giving them data anecdotally about how they're using the different solutions that they currently have, maybe highlighting you don't use this, maybe you don't need it, and then opening up their budgets to exploring something else, or maybe they just don't need all those extra things. What are some of the other tools that the operator side is using to, I guess, keep track of? And I mean, maybe there's things you haven't even mentioned that they're doing within your stack.
Yeah, you're so right, because it really is. It's fun to be able to build a tool for operators, that helps them go as deep and as wide as they want to into their vendor ecosystem. So operators can use the Revyse.com marketplace for free, or with the Revyse Vendor Intelligence platform, they can have a comprehensive lifecycle management platform for their vendor ecosystem. And so within the platform, it's everything from contract management. And so uh, recording all of their agreements, their documents. Our product Zipline AI, we actually classify and extract all of the data from the documents. So contract terms, pricing insights, categories, to be able to leverage that data for operators to analyze and understand, okay, what are my contractual obligations? What are my price increases next year? Do I have overlap in a specific category? Is this a corporate vendor versus a location vendor? How many communities are leveraging this vendor? What's my trending spend over time? Is there an opportunity for bulk pricing? And so it's really cool once you dig into that data to be able to understand all of the business processes that can be improved, or efficiencies that can be gained from having that. One in particular is transitions workflows. So we've built this really great set of tools for acquisitions and dispositions teams to be able to leverage this data when they're onboarding a new property, to quickly spin up a set of vendors, or disposing of a property to be able to communicate with vendors different timelines and service termination dates, and where to send final invoices. So it's kind of cool to be able to see, like, once you've unlocked all of this data around your vendors, how can you make it easier for everyone to do their daily jobs just by having access to it?
Yeah, for sure. And I can only imagine, and I know it's not every company, and depending on size and all that, it ends up being just a marketing role, or falling on the marketing role. Maybe that's the better way to say it, of picking technology, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It should probably be a person that's just over technology decisions. But I
Yeah.
think eventually that'll happen. And with tools like yours, that makes it a lot easier, because they can actually be managing all these decisions, and be better versed at what's available and what's being used, and picking the best in breed versus every community deciding on their own, like which vendor they're going to use that does the same thing, but you can't support them because you don't know every single software. Um,
It's it's interesting. The data that we have actually shows that in multifamily, more than 75% of technologies are managed outside of the IT organization. And the
mhm,
bulk of those are managed by marketing. So you're spot
mhm.
on, Evan. It is really interesting. In this industry, the burden of technology management tends to fall on marketing. And I think that a lot of the reason for that is that marketing tends to own the resident life cycle. And a lot of the technologies that we leverage span the resident life cycle. We actually have a report in Revyse that breaks down your Proptech stack by phase of resident life cycle. So you can go in and see what technology is supporting the move-in phase versus the application phase, and understand what it is that you're using, so that when you need to make a decision to either plug something in or unplug something, you can see the ecosystem that it's going to influence or impact when you make that decision. But it is really interesting to see how marketing tends to shoulder the burden of technology in our industry.
Mhm. And being, I mean, you were in that role and in that decision making seat. What was your takeaway? Did that seem like that made sense overall? Now, not to say you wouldn't want to be plugged into it and be aware of it, because it does impact marketing. But from the standpoint of from the operator side, is there advice you'd give like for the future is there a role in the perfect world that you'd say this is a person, I think, and maybe some companies are doing it and I think they are, that would be kind of be overseer and then bring forth like the different departments or something? I don't know.
Yeah. I think we're seeing an evolution of the org structure in multifamily. We work with a couple of operators who have executive level roles where the job title is both head of marketing and technology, or a CMO role oversees both technology and marketing. And so we are seeing operators understand that paradigm and try to empower their leaders to own that. We're also seeing a big push into chief analytics and chief data officers, which I think is incredible. As soon as the multifamily industry grasps the power that is ownership of their data, our industry is going to fly. We have so much good ahead of us as that component begins to evolve and we begin to really harness our resident data and understand it more deeply in an actionable way. And there are some incredible companies that are already doing that and people who are making huge headway in that area. And so the other thing that we're seeing a lot of is we're seeing a lot of operators begin to hire procurement roles, leadership procurement roles, whether it's head of sourcing, head of procurement, because they really understand that they need someone to come in and be able to connect the dots, whether it's an on-site supplier or a national supplier or a technology vendor. There really needs to be an understanding of the entire third-party vendor ecosystem.
Yeah. And have you kind of tied to that, have you seen when it comes to making decisions on technology, the role of running pilots with tech growing?
So it's interesting. Pilots are controversial.
Okay. I'm here for it.
Pilots are controversial. As a vendor, pilots are hard, right? Because oftentimes, depending on your product, you're putting the full weight of your implementation team and all of your costly resources behind, a 5-property test, which costs a lot of money for a vendor, right?
Sure.
But as an operator, I love pilots because I want the opportunity to be able to take a look at my internal business processes and understand if I really want to get the most out of this tool or out of this technology, do I need to change roles, responsibilities, processes, SOPs on my end to be able to maximize that? And without understanding that, if I sign my whole portfolio and we onboard and I didn't change my business process, then the tool's not going to be able to live up to its greatest potential.
Sure.
And so a pilot lets me assess whether or not I need to change who's responsible, what the steps in the SOP are, what the outcome is before I onboard that tech. And so it's a really hard balance because as a vendor, pilots are very expensive and we can't necessarily resource against non-committed revenue and be able to be a thriving company that's going to take care of our employees and provide security in their jobs, right? All the things that we love to do as vendors and as business owners. And so it's a really tough balance, though I think that the industry is coming together and are having more direct and open conversations about pilots and testing and how we can bring benefit to both sides. And we've built some tools at Revyse in our RVI platform that allows operators to be able to track their pilots, which I think is a huge missing piece sometimes, right? A pilot just for the sake of a pilot isn't going to move the needle unless you have clearly defined KPIs and you know what you're tracking.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And you went out, you needed proposals for all these different things because you had an issue, you had a problem that you need fixed. you wanted to compare a couple different companies maybe and see which one served you the best when it comes to tech or whatever it is. But if you don't have the thing to compare them with,
Yeah.
it's like subjective to a degree, right? Like,
Yep.
how do I read the data? How do I know that this was successful more than this one? And it's like a feeling.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I
And so
feel like it was.
that is where unbiased peer reviews can be so powerful, because as an operator, I would pick up the phone and I would say, okay, who do I know that has used this tool that would be willing to give me unfiltered feedback on their
Mhm.
experience?
Right.
And that is such a fantastic thing to have a network who can help provide that for you. But when you're newer to the industry or you're younger in your role, you may not have built that network yet. And so you might
Mm,
not have the phone a friend opportunity. And so being able to read authentic reviews and understand transparently things like integration capabilities or
mhm.
pricing or product features, it really helps give you the context you need to be able to start thinking about those shopping decisions.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, that's obviously something you're trying to provide the marketplace. What have you learned about that process though of getting people to like make a review or like be transparent and have their name attached to it and that kind of thing? Is there hesitancy by people to be like, "Hey, I am putting my name behind this."
So we've been really surprised. We thought that there was going to be a lot more hesitation in the industry, but we built the review submission and review process. We built it out to be really thorough. So the user who's submitting the review can choose whether or not they show their last name or their last initial, their job title, their company name. They can choose how that is displayed publicly,
Hmm.
which gives people more flexibility in how it against company policy. If their company has a
Sure.
policy that they're not allowed to speak publicly about their partnerships, but
Mhm.
also just personally, I know for me, I come from a generation that tends to stay away from things like phones and social media. And so for me, someone who doesn't normally leave public reviews, I like the ability to be able to choose how my personal information is displayed. But then
Mhm.
on the Revyse side, we collect all of that, and our team goes and vets and verifies every review before it's published. And so we make sure that the reviewer has experience with the product, that the review follows FTC guidelines before we publish the review publicly. And so there's a big process that we've built into the product to support the transparency of reviews. But one thing that we were really surprised about is that the industry is a lot less hesitant than we were initially expecting. And people really are motivated to share their experiences once they see the value that the transparency can bring.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Is there a certain type of tech people have been more interested in speaking about and reviewing than other things?
So we see a lot of data on what people are shopping for, not
Okay. What are they
necessarily
shopping for?
yeah, not necessarily, reviewing, but what people are shopping for is very interesting, and it fluctuates, every quarter. There are, new categories that rise to the top that people are really interested in. So some of the winners today that the industry seems to be really interested in are screening and verification tools are definitely at the top of the list. There's a lot of interest in understanding what's out there.
Like
Um,
and
the
fraud protection
Yep,
and things?
hmm yep. Understanding how the technology has evolved over the last 12 months and what the landscape looks like. Leasing AI is still such a popular category. We see a ton of traffic on that category. Advertising and ILS is still a really significantly shopped category as well. And then some back office tools are really starting to pick up. So contract management, vendor management, um, budgeting software this time of year. There's a lot of views on budgeting, and then data and analytics and BI. So it really has fluctuated depending on the focus of the industry at the moment.
Yeah. Do you know the persona of like who's doing the shopping?
Yep. On Revyse specifically, our audience is almost entirely leadership. So it's
Mm,
almost entirely director roles and above, which is amazing because it is decision makers versus, and I think a lot of it is because it is very focused on the shopping and the purchasing and procurement of
mhm.
these tech and tools. And so it's interesting to see that it is primarily decision makers who are shopping the Revyse platform.
Mm, mhm. Yeah, I think that makes sense, especially as we're, seeing a consolidation of decision making in the companies. They're trying to figure out who that person is, whether that's marketing, they make a role, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, but, I think historically, we've always seen it be like on-site people, especially what we provide, because it's a very unique problem they're faced with to fix using specifically us, for instance. What we noticed when we go to things like Optech is we talk to the person that is the tech person, and they aren't
Mhm.
aware of the problem that we specifically
Yeah.
uh help with, because they're not faced with it. They don't know
Yeah.
that that specific thing is an issue. um so it's an interesting thing which types of software the different decision makers are looking
Mhm.
for. Obviously all the ones you listed make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
I
operational
think
things are, yeah.
though it's interesting because we do there is a I think there is a big shift in the industry to, um and centralize is not the right word,
Yeah.
but to look at vendor partnerships from a risk and compliance perspective and to have the decision making or at least the approval process to be centralized underneath someone in a tech management type role. So
Mhm.
even if it is an on-site, if it's a community manager or a regional who wants to bring this new tool on,
Yeah.
having it go through that approvals process so that IT
Yeah.
can do a risk review and look at
Mhm.
things like SOC 2 compliance or
Right.
where PII is being stored, right? Or from a procurement and risk on the credentialing of the vendor. Like, do we have their W-9? Do we have their certificate of insurance if they need cybersecurity insurance?
Mhm.
And so I think we are seeing a big push for those types of approval processes to live at corporate, even though the catalyst for needing a vendor may come from an on-site role. Um, it's unfair to expect on-site teams to be able to do an IT risk review. And so
Yeah.
that's got to be a function that is taken care of at corporate. So
Yep.
being able to facilitate that process of approvals and workflows is a big component of what we do at Revyse.
Yeah. No, I think that's helpful. I think those on-site people, they're just trying to fix something. And
Yeah.
there's certain things that are very nuanced from property to property, and then there's other things that everybody's using, right? When it comes to
Yep.
marketing or whatever it is, ILSs and things. So it's like that's kind of like, oh, we just pick one and use it. Versus sometimes now there's obviously best in breed in everything, potentially. Um, so being able to help those on-site people judge something against actual user experience by other people, even if they're, on site and not aware. That's something I've become very aware of, is like on site people aren't the people that are going to all these conferences, right? Like
Hmm.
they're on site.
Yep. Yes.
So, you know, they need some help as well. So
Yeah.
that's the area I have ideas. I don't know. I'll share them with you offline.
Yes, that's awesome. But it's so true. Needing to establish a feedback loop, right? So that the people who are making those decisions and attending the demos or going to a conference are soliciting feedback and getting feedback from the on-site teams who have like the frontline experience with these issues. It's so important. Otherwise you're making decisions in isolation, right? And
Mhm.
it may be missing the mark on what your teams actually need.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I really appreciate you sharing your journey so far and
Yeah.
all that you've learned with starting a new company and the grind of it all and getting it pivoting, seeing opportunities as you're doing it. Obviously, that's the right way to approach it is somebody's saying, hey, this is really what we need. Okay,
Yep.
then I guess that's what we're doing.
Yep.
But obviously that's also hard. So
Yes.
it's a
Keeps me on
grind.
my toes.
Oh
Keeps me on
yeah.
my toes. Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Thank you, Evan. This was great. This was great. I really appreciate the invitation, and
Yeah.
thank you to the folks on LinkedIn Live, so for
Yeah.
joining.
Yeah. We had Justin. He I don't know if you saw, he said, if Bobbi Steward can do it, I can do it. He flipped the you said it based on
If
somebody
Taylor
else in
Swift
that.
can
Yeah,
do it,
Taylor Swift can do
Taylor
it.
Swift
Yeah,
can do
yeah,
it, I
yeah,
can do
yeah, yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. And Jessica from Nurture Boss, she chimed in too. So thanks for watching, guys. All right. Well, just like Bobbi, she shared her passions and her story here on Boss Talks, episode 102. You too can. So if you have things to share and a story to tell, I'd love to have you here on the show. Just reach out and we'll make it happen. But again, Bobbi, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for those that watched and will listen in the future. So
Yep.
have
Thank
a great
you.
week, everyone.